The alarm clock screamed at 4:30 a.m., but Lisa was already awake. She had been lying in bed for the past hour, staring at the ceiling and calculating numbers in her head. Rent was due in 5 days. Her mom's prescription would run out next week, and her little brother David needed new textbooks for his engineering classes. The math never seemed to work out, no matter how many times she tried. Lisa rolled out of her narrow bed and stepped carefully around the creaky floorboard that always woke up her roommate. Their tiny apartment in the old part of town wasn't much, but it was all she could afford on a waitress salary. The walls were thin, the heater barely worked, and the neighbors upstairs seemed to practice tap dancing at midnight. But it was home, and more importantly, it was cheap. She pulled on her faded uniform, a simple black dress with a white apron that had seen better days. The fabric was soft from countless washes, and there was a small burn mark on the sleeve from when she'd gotten too close to the kitchen's grill last month. She'd tried to cover it with a small pin, but you could still see it if you looked closely. Lisa had asked her boss about getting a new uniform, but Mr. Romano said they'd have to wait until business picked up. The bus ride to work took 40 minutes and cost $3 each way. Lisa often calculated how much money she'd save if she could afford a car, but then she'd remember that cars needed insurance, gas, and repairs. The bus was reliable enough even if it smelled like old coffee and the seats had springs poking through the cushions. Romano's family diner sat on the corner of 5th and Main, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a shop that sold used electronics. The building was from the 1960s, with a red brick exterior and large windows that Mr. Romano cleaned every Sunday morning. Inside, there were 12 booths with cracked vinyl seats and 8 counter stools that spun if you weren't careful. The black and white checkered floor had been there since the place opened, and despite Lisa's best efforts with the mop, some stains had become permanent residents. Lisa arrived at 5:30 a.m. to help prep for the breakfast rush. She tied her hair back in a neat ponytail and started filling salt shakers and ketchup bottles. These weren't glamorous tasks, but she took pride in doing them well. Every table got a thorough wipe down, every sugar dispenser got topped off, and every coffee pot got a fresh brew. Mr. Romano was a kind man in his 60s who had inherited the diner from his father. He treated his employees fairly, but the restaurant was struggling. 3 new coffee shops had opened within 4 blocks in the past year, all with trendy names and expensive machines that made drinks with names Lisa couldn't pronounce. Young professionals flocked to these places with their laptops and stayed for hours, ordering $7 lattes. Meanwhile, Romanos served honest food at honest prices. Their coffee was strong and hot, their pancakes were fluffy, and their burgers were made with real beef. But honest food didn't seem to be what people wanted anymore. The breakfast crowd was mostly older folks who had been coming for years, and the lunch rush brought in construction workers and office staff looking for quick, cheap meals. Lisa had been working at Romano's for 3 years, ever since she dropped out of college to help support her family. Her father had died in a car accident when she was 20, leaving behind medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover, and a family that suddenly had no primary income. Her mother worked part-time at a grocery store, but chronic arthritis in her hands made it hard for her to work full shifts. David was the smart one in the family. He'd gotten a partial scholarship to study engineering at the community college, but it only covered tuition. Books, supplies, and lab fees came out of pocket, and those costs added up quickly. Lisa had made a promise to herself that David would finish school, no matter what. He was going to be the first person in their family to get a college degree, and she wasn't going to let money stop him. Most days, Lisa worked a double shift. She'd start at 5:30 a.m., work until 2 p.m., take a 2-hour break, then come back for the dinner shift until 10 p.m. It was exhausting, but the extra hours meant extra tips and every dollar counted. She'd gotten good at calculating her tips in her head throughout the day, keeping a running total that helped her plan which bills she could pay. The breakfast crowd started filtering in around 6 a.m. There was Mrs. Chen, who ordered the same thing every day: 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, and black coffee. She was a retired teacher who always left exactly 15% tip and asked about Lisa's family. Then came Tony, a construction foreman who liked his eggs scrambled and his coffee refilled at least 4 times. He was loud and sometimes crude, but he tipped well and always said please and thank you. Lisa had learned that being a good waitress was about more than just taking orders and delivering food. People came to diners for different reasons. Some wanted quick service so they could get to work. Others were lonely and looking for a few minutes of friendly conversation. Some were stressed about money, just like she was, and appreciated when she'd slip them an extra dinner roll or suggest the daily special because it was a better value. She'd developed a system for remembering orders without writing them down, which impressed customers and saved time. She could carry 4 plates at once without spilling anything, pour coffee with one hand while clearing dishes with the other, and somehow always remember who ordered their burger medium rare versus well done. But the long hours were taking their toll. Lisa's feet ached constantly, even with the comfortable shoes she'd splurged on last year. Her back was sore from reaching across tables and carrying heavy trays. Some nights she was so tired that she'd fall asleep on the bus and miss her stop. The worst part wasn't the physical exhaustion, though. It was watching her dreams slip further away with each passing month. She'd wanted to be a teacher, like Mrs. Chen had been. She'd loved working with kids at the community center before her father died, but college seemed impossible now. And even if she could figure out the money, when would she find time for classes? Still, Lisa tried to stay positive. She'd smile at difficult customers, laugh at jokes she'd heard 100 times, and always thank people for their tips, no matter how small. Her coworkers often commented on her attitude, wondering how she stayed so upbeat when everyone knew she was struggling. The truth was, Lisa had learned that being bitter wouldn't change anything. Complaining wouldn't pay her bills or help her family, and taking out her frustrations on customers would only hurt her tips. So she chose to find small joys in her work, making a perfect cup of coffee, helping a confused customer decide what to order, or getting a genuine smile from someone who looked like they were having a bad day. As the morning rush wound down and lunch approached, Lisa wiped down her section and counted her tips from the breakfast shift. $43.27. Not bad for a Tuesday morning, but not great either. She had enough for groceries this week, but her mom's prescription would have to wait a few more days. Lisa took a deep breath, retied her apron, and prepared for whatever the rest of the day would bring. She had no idea that in just a few hours her life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. The rain started around 6 in the evening, turning what should have been the dinner rush into a slow, quiet night. Lisa watched the drops race down the large front windows of Romano's diner, creating little rivers that distorted the view of the empty street outside. The weather had kept most people home, and the few customers they'd had earlier had already finished their meals and left. She was wiping down table 4 for the 3rd time when she heard the bell above the front door chime. Lisa looked up to see an older man stepping inside, shaking raindrops from an expensive-looking black coat. He was probably in his 70s with silver hair that was perfectly styled despite the weather. His suit looked like it cost more than Lisa made in 2 months, and his leather shoes were the kind you only saw in magazine ads. The man stood in the doorway for a moment, scanning the nearly empty diner. Lisa could tell he wasn't their usual type of customer. Most people who wandered into Romano's wore work clothes or casual outfits. This man looked like he belonged in one of those fancy steakhouses downtown, the kind with valet parking and wine lists thicker than phone books. Lisa grabbed a menu and walked over with her best customer service smile. "Good evening, sir. Table for 1. The man nodded and followed her to booth 7, near the back corner. As they walked, Lisa noticed he seemed distracted, almost troubled. His shoulders were tense, and he kept checking his phone like he was expecting an important call. That wasn't coming. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Lisa asked as he settled into the booth. "Our coffee's fresh and we've got hot chocolate if you're trying to warm up from the rain." "Coffee would be fine," he said, his voice carrying a slight weariness. "Black, please." When Lisa returned with the coffee pot, she noticed the man had taken off his suit jacket and hung it carefully on the back of the booth. Underneath, he wore a crisp white shirt with expensive-looking cufflinks that caught the diner's fluorescent lights. Everything about him screamed money, from his perfectly manicured fingernails to the gold watch on his wrist. "Have you decided what you'd like to eat?" Lisa asked, setting down the steaming mug. He glanced at the menu briefly. What would you recommend? Most customers didn't ask Lisa for recommendations. They usually knew what they wanted or spent several minutes studying the menu. But something in his voice suggested he genuinely wanted her opinion. Well, Lisa said, thinking for a moment, if you're looking for comfort food, our meatloaf is really good. Mr. Romano makes it with his grandmother's recipe. The chicken and dumplings are popular too, especially on rainy nights like this. They're both hearty and warming. The man looked up at her for the first time since sitting down. His eyes were a deep blue, and Lisa could see intelligence there, along with something that looked like surprise. Maybe he hadn't expected such a thoughtful answer from a diner waitress. The meatloaf sounds perfect, he said. Thank you. As Lisa put in his order, she couldn't help but wonder what had brought this obviously wealthy man to their little diner on a Tuesday night. Romano's wasn't exactly hidden, but it wasn't the kind of place you'd stumble into by accident if you were used to fine dining. The man seemed lost in thought, staring out the rain-streaked window with his hands wrapped around his coffee mug. When she brought out his food, Lisa noticed he barely touched it at first. He kept checking his phone and seemed to be wrestling with something in his mind. After a few minutes, he started eating slowly, mechanically, like he was going through the motions rather than actually enjoying the meal. Is everything okay with your food? Lisa asked during one of her check-ins. Oh yes, he said, seeming to snap back to the present. It's very good. Better than I expected, actually. Lisa smiled. Mr. Romano will be happy to hear that. He takes a lot of pride in the food here. You've worked here long? The man asked. About 3 years now, Lisa replied. It's a good place to work. Mr. Romano treats us well. The man nodded thoughtfully. That's rare these days. Good employers, I mean. Something in his tone made Lisa curious. Are you in business yourself? You could say that, he said with a slight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Real estate mostly. Building things, buying things, selling things. It's not as exciting as it sounds. Lisa laughed softly. I don't know. It sounds pretty exciting to me. I've never owned anything bigger than a bicycle. The man looked at her again with that same surprised expression. You're very honest. My mom always said there's no point in pretending to be something. You're not, Lisa said. People see through it anyway. As the evening wore on, Lisa found herself checking on the man more frequently than she normally would. There was something about him that seemed sad, despite his obvious wealth. He'd finish his coffee and she'd refill it without being asked. He seemed grateful for the small gesture of attention. Around 8:30, the man's phone rang. He answered it quickly, his voice dropping to a whisper. Lisa couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see his expression grow more troubled. When he hung up, he sat staring at the phone for a long moment. Bad news? Lisa asked gently when she came by to refill his coffee again. Business troubles, he said simply. Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it. Lisa didn't know what to say to that. Her idea of business troubles was whether Romano's would have enough customers to keep everyone employed, but she could recognize the universal look of someone carrying a heavy burden. My dad used to say that every problem looks smaller after a good night's sleep and a hot meal, she offered. The man smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, Lisa said quietly. He died a few years ago, but he had a lot of good advice. I'm sorry for your loss, the man said, and Lisa could tell he meant it. They talked a little more as the evening progressed. Lisa learned that the man lived alone in a big house on the north side of the city. He had grown children who lived far away and rarely visited. His wife had passed away 5 years earlier, and he admitted that he sometimes came to places like this just to be around people, even if he wasn't really talking to them. Lisa told him a little about her family, about David's college dreams, and her mother's arthritis. She didn't mention the financial struggles directly, but the man seemed to understand without being told. There was something comforting about talking to a stranger, someone who didn't know her story and wouldn't judge her circumstances. Around 9:15, the man asked for his check. As Lisa calculated the total, She noticed him reaching into his jacket pocket, then frowning. He checked the other pocket, then began searching more frantically. "Is everything all right?" Lisa asked. The man's face had gone pale. "My wallet," he said, his voice tight with panic. "It's not here." Lisa watched as he checked his pockets again, then looked around the booth. He moved his jacket, checked under the table, even looked in the seat cushions. "I had it when I came." "In," he said, more to himself than to Lisa. "I'm sure I had it." That's when Steve, the night manager, appeared at their table. Lisa hadn't even realized he'd been watching them. Steve appeared at their table like a shadow, his arms crossed and his face wearing that expression Lisa had learned to fear. He'd been the night manager at Romano's for about 6 months, and in that time, he'd made it clear he didn't think much of Lisa or her work. Steve was the type of person who seemed to enjoy other people's problems, especially when those problems made him look better by comparison. "What's going on here?" Steve asked, his voice loud enough to carry across the quiet diner. The older gentleman looked up, clearly flustered. "I seem to have misplaced my wallet. I had it when I arrived, but now I can't find it anywhere." Steve's eyes immediately shifted to Lisa, and she felt her stomach drop. She'd seen that look before, the look of someone who'd already decided what happened and was just waiting for an excuse to act on it. "Lisa," Steve said slowly, "you've been serving this table all evening, haven't you?" "Yes," Lisa replied, her voice steady despite the growing knot in her chest. "I brought him coffee, took his order, served his meal, just normal service." "And you've been back to this table how many times?" Steve pressed, his tone getting sharper. Lisa felt heat rising in her cheeks. "I don't know exactly. Several times to refill his coffee, check on his food, the usual things. That's my job." The gentleman was watching this exchange with growing concern. "Now wait a minute," he said. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just trying to figure out where I might have left my wallet." But Steve wasn't listening to him. His attention was focused entirely on Lisa, like a predator who'd spotted weakness. "You know, Lisa, you've been complaining about money lately, always talking about your bills, your family's problems. Maybe you saw an opportunity here." Lisa's mouth fell open. "Are you serious right now? You think I stole from a customer?" "I'm not thinking anything," Steve said with fake innocence. "I'm just saying that wallets don't just disappear on their own, and you're the only one who's been near this table all night." By now, the few other customers in the diner had turned to watch the confrontation. Lisa could feel their eyes on her, and she wanted to disappear into the floor. Old Mrs. Patterson, who came in every Tuesday for pie, was shaking her head with disappointment. 2 truck drivers at the counter had stopped their conversation to stare. "This is ridiculous," Lisa said, her voice getting louder. "I would never steal from anyone, especially not a customer. That's what someone who stole something would say," Steve replied, enjoying himself now. "Look, Lisa, if you just admit what you did and give the wallet back, maybe we can handle this quietly. No need to involve the police." The word police hit Lisa like a physical blow. She thought about her family, about David's college dreams, about her mother's medical bills. A theft charge would ruin everything. No one would hire her and her family would lose their only steady income. "Steve, stop this right now," she said, her hands shaking. "I didn't take anything." The older gentleman stood up from the booth, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this was heading. "Perhaps we should all calm down and think about this rationally," he said. "Sir, I'm really sorry about this," Steve said, switching to his fake customer service voice. "We take theft very seriously here at Romano's. I'm going to search Lisa's apron and her locker, and if we don't find your wallet, we'll have to call the police." Lisa felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of everyone. "You can search whatever you want," she said. "You won't find anything because I didn't take anything." Steve reached for her apron ties and Lisa stepped back instinctively. "Don't touch me," she said firmly. "See?" Steve announced to the room. "She's being defensive. That's exactly what guilty people do." The truck drivers were nodding now, convinced by Steve's performance. Mrs. Patterson was gathering her purse, clearly wanting to leave. Lisa could see the doubt in everyone's eyes, and it felt worse than any physical pain she'd ever experienced. The older gentleman watched all of this with growing distress. "This doesn't feel right," he said quietly. "What doesn't feel right is having a thief working in your restaurant," Steve shot back. "Sir, I promise you we're going to get to the bottom of this." Lisa's mind was racing. She knew she hadn't taken the wallet, but she also knew how these situations worked. A poor waitress, accused by her manager versus a wealthy customer's missing wallet. Who was anyone going to believe? She thought about all the time she'd been careful not to even touch customers' personal belongings, specifically to avoid situations like this. "You know what?" Lisa said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension. "I know exactly how to prove I didn't take anything." Steve's smug expression faltered slightly. "Oh, really? How's that?" Lisa looked directly at the older gentleman, her eyes blazing with determination. "Sir, you said you're in real estate, right? Business? So you understand how important security is." The man nodded, not sure where she was going with this. "This diner has security cameras," Lisa continued, pointing toward the corners of the room where small black cameras were mounted. "They record everything that happens in here. Every table, every customer interaction, every movement." Steve's face went white. "Lisa, that's not necessary. We can handle this ourselves." "No," Lisa said firmly, her confidence growing. "If you're so sure I stole this man's wallet, then the cameras will show it, won't they? They'll show exactly when I took it and where I put it." The older gentleman's eyebrows rose with interest. "That's an excellent idea," he said. "The cameras would show everything, wouldn't they?" "The cameras don't always work properly," Steve said quickly. "Sometimes they're broken, sometimes the footage isn't clear. It's not reliable evidence." "Then why does Mr. Romano pay for them?" Lisa challenged. "He told me just last month that the new system records everything in high definition." He was proud of the upgrade. Lisa turned back to the gentleman, her voice steady and clear. "Sir, I know you don't know me from anyone else in this city. You have no reason to trust me over my manager. But I'm asking you to let them check the security footage before you call the police or make any decisions." "The footage won't show anything useful," Steve insisted, sweat starting to form on his forehead. "We're wasting time when we should be searching for the wallet." "If the footage won't show anything useful," the older gentleman said slowly, "then what do you have to lose by checking it?" Lisa could see Steve struggling for an answer. Around the diner, the other customers were listening intently. This wasn't just about a missing wallet anymore. It was about truth and justice and whether an honest person could be railroaded by someone with authority. "Look," Lisa said, her voice getting stronger with each word. "I've worked here for 3 years. I've never had a single complaint about honesty. I've returned phones that customers left behind. I've chased people down the street when they forgot their credit cards. I've even returned a $20 bill that fell out of someone's pocket." She looked around the room, making eye contact with each person watching. "I know what it's like to need money. I know what it's like to struggle. But I would never ever steal from someone else. That's not who I am, and that's not how I was raised." The older gentleman was studying her face carefully. "You're absolutely certain about these cameras?" "I'm certain," Lisa said without hesitation. "And I'm certain about what they'll show. They'll show me doing my job, nothing more and nothing less." Steve opened his mouth to protest again, but the gentleman held up his hand. "I think checking the security footage is a reasonable request," he said firmly. "In fact, I insist on it." Mr. Romano emerged from the kitchen at exactly the wrong moment, wiping his hands on his apron and looking confused by the crowd gathered around booth 7. At 62 years old, he'd seen plenty of drama in his diner over the years, but the tension in the air tonight felt different, more serious. "What's going on out here?" he asked, his Italian accent still strong after 40 years in America. Steve immediately jumped in, trying to control the narrative. "Mr. Romano, we have a situation. This gentleman's wallet has gone missing, and I believe Lisa might have taken it." Mr. Romano's bushy eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Lisa? Our Lisa?" He looked at her standing there with tears threatening to spill, then at Steve with his sweaty, nervous expression. "This doesn't sound right." "Sir, I think we should check the security cameras. the older gentleman said calmly. Lisa suggested it herself, and I think it's a fair way to resolve the situation. Mr. Romano nodded slowly. Yes, of course. The cameras see everything in here. We can clear this up right away. He looked at Steve with concern. Why didn't you suggest this first? It would save everyone a lot of trouble. I was trying to handle it quietly, Steve mumbled, but his confidence was clearly shaking. Quietly, Mr. Romano gestured around the diner where every customer was watching intently. This doesn't look quiet to me. Come on, everyone. Let's go to my office and look at the footage. The small group made their way to the back of the diner, past the kitchen and into Mr. Romano's tiny office. The room barely fit 4 people comfortably, but somehow they all squeezed in around the desk where a computer monitor showed a grid of camera views from around the restaurant. Lisa's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She knew she hadn't taken the wallet, but there was always that tiny voice of doubt whispering, what if something went wrong? What if the cameras malfunctioned? What if the angle was bad and something looked suspicious even though it wasn't? Mr. Romano pulled up the footage from earlier that evening, starting from when the older gentleman first walked into the diner. The timestamp showed 6:23 p.m. They watched in silence as the man entered, shook off his coat and followed Lisa to booth 7. There, the gentleman said, pointing at the screen. You can see me hanging my jacket on the back of the booth. My wallet was in the inside pocket. The footage continued, showing Lisa bringing coffee, taking his order, and walking back to the kitchen. Everything looked normal and professional. Lisa felt a small wave of relief watching herself on screen. She looked calm and competent, not like someone planning to steal anything. Fast forward to when I went to the restroom, the gentleman said. That would have been around 7:15, I think. Mr. Romano moved the footage forward until they saw the man getting up from the booth and walking toward the back of the restaurant. His jacket remained hanging on the booth, clearly visible to the cameras. Now watch carefully, Lisa said, her voice steady despite her nerves. If I took the wallet, it would have to be during this time when he was away from the table. They all leaned in closer to watch. The cameras showed Lisa refilling coffee for other customers, wiping down empty tables and chatting briefly with Mrs. Patterson about her grandchildren. At no point did she go near booth 7 or the hanging jacket. See? Lisa said, relief flooding her voice. I never went near his table while he was gone. But Steve wasn't giving up yet. Maybe it happened later. Let's keep watching. The footage continued, showing the gentleman returning from the restroom and settling back into his booth. Lisa brought his meal, refilled his coffee several more times, and had their various conversations. The cameras captured everything from multiple angles, and it was crystal clear that Lisa never touched the jacket or reached into any pockets. This is ridiculous, Steve said, his voice getting desperate. The cameras must have missed something. Maybe she took it when she was standing, right next to the booth, and the angle was bad. Mr. Romano shook his head. Steve, these cameras cover every inch of the dining room, look. He pointed to different camera views. Camera 1 shows the booth from the front, camera 2 shows it from the side, camera 3 catches everything, from above. There's no blind spot. The older gentleman was studying the screen intently, but now his attention seemed focused on something else. Can you rewind to around 7:30? He asked. Why 7:30? Steve asked quickly. I want to see something, the gentleman said simply. Mr. Romano rewound the footage. At 7:31 p.m., they watched Steve walking through the dining room, checking on tables. He moved normally until he reached the area near booth 7. Then something interesting happened. Pause it there, the gentleman said. On the screen, Steve was frozen mid-step, right next to the booth where the jacket was hanging. From this angle, they could see him glancing around to make sure no one was watching. Continue, but go slow, the gentleman instructed. They watched as Steve took a quick step closer to the booth. His body blocked the view of the jacket for just a moment, and when he moved away, his hand was going into his pocket. What was that? Mr. Romano asked, his voice sharp. I was checking if the table needed cleaning, Steve said, but his voice was shaky now. Your hand went to your pocket, Lisa said, hardly believing what she was seeing. What did you put in your pocket? Nothing. I didn't put anything in my pocket. The older gentleman stood up slowly, his face dark with anger. Young man, I suggest you empty your pockets right now. This is crazy, Steve protested. You're all ganging up on me because of some unclear camera footage. You can't even tell what I was doing from that angle. Mr. Romano's face was getting red. Steve, empty your pockets now. I don't have to do anything, Steve said, backing toward the door. This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer. But his nervous behavior had already convinced everyone in the room. Lisa felt a mixture of relief and anger washing over her. Relief that she was about to be cleared, and anger that Steve had been willing to destroy her reputation to cover up his own crime. Wait, Mr. Romano said firmly. Nobody leaves this office until we sort this out. He stood up and blocked the doorway. Despite being in his 60s, Mr. Romano was still a big man with strong arms from years of kitchen work. The older gentleman pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. They can search him properly and check his locker if necessary. No, wait. Steve's voice cracked. Okay. Maybe I picked up something by mistake. I didn't mean to take anything. I was confused. Confused about what? Lisa demanded. Confused about reaching into someone's jacket and taking their wallet? Steve's face crumpled. All his arrogance and authority disappeared, leaving behind a scared man who knew he'd been caught. I didn't plan it, he said quietly. I saw the wallet when I was walking by, and I needed the money. My girlfriend's been asking me to get her a job here, and I thought if Lisa got fired, there would be an opening. The room fell silent except for the hum of the computer and the distant sounds of the kitchen. Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. Steve had been willing to ruin her life just to create a job opening for his girlfriend. You were going to let me get arrested, Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. You were going to let me lose my job, get a criminal record, destroy my family's future. Also, your girlfriend could work here. Steve couldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry, he mumbled. I panicked. I didn't know what else to do. Mr. Romano's voice was ice cold. Where's the wallet, Steve? With shaking hands, Steve reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. He set it on the desk like it was a bomb that might explode. The older gentleman picked up his wallet and checked inside. Everything's here, he said. Then he looked at Steve with disgust. You have no idea what you almost did to this young woman. Lisa woke up the next morning feeling lighter than she had in months. For the first time in years, she hadn't spent the night calculating bills or worrying about money. Steve had been fired on the spot, and Mr. Romano had given her a heartfelt apology along with a promise of a raise. The older gentleman had left a $100 tip and thanked her for her honesty. It felt like justice had finally won. She got dressed in her usual uniform and caught the bus to work, still replaying the events of the previous evening. The other customers had witnessed everything, and word was already spreading through their small community about what had happened. Mrs. Patterson had called 3 of her friends before she even left the diner. When Lisa arrived at Romano's, she immediately noticed something strange. There was a crowd gathered outside the restaurant, and they were all looking at something parked on the street. Lisa pushed through the small group of people and stopped dead in her tracks. A gleaming black Rolls Royce sat at the curb, so shiny, it looked like a mirror. It was the kind of car Lisa had only seen in movies or driving past on the highway. The vehicle was massive, elegant, and completely out of place on their modest street corner. A large red bow was tied across the hood, making it look like the world's most expensive Christmas present. Whose car is that? Someone in the crowd asked. I heard it's been here since 6 this morning, another person replied. Lisa stared at the car, confused. She'd never seen anything like it in person. The chrome bumpers were spotless, the leather interior visible through the windows looked softer than her own bed, and the car probably cost more than most people's houses. A man in a dark suit approached her. He was young, maybe in his 30s, with the kind of confident bearing that came from expensive education and important jobs. He carried a briefcase and walked like he owned the sidewalk. Excuse me, are you Lisa? he asked politely. Yes, Lisa replied, still staring at the car. Who's asking? My name is Thomas. I'm an attorney representing a client who wishes to remain anonymous for now. Are you the Lisa who works at Romano's diner? Lisa nodded, completely bewildered. Yeah, that's me. What's going on? Thomas smiled and pulled a set of keys from his pocket. They weren't ordinary keys. They looked expensive, with a silver keychain that probably cost more than Lisa's monthly rent. This vehicle belongs to you now, Thomas said simply. Lisa's mouth fell open. I'm sorry, what? The Rolls-Royce. It's yours. My client has purchased it and had it delivered here this morning. All the paperwork is complete, insurance is paid for the first year, and it's registered in your name. Lisa felt dizzy. There has to be some mistake. I can't afford a car like this. I can barely afford my bus pass. There's no mistake, Thomas said gently. My client was very specific. He wanted to thank you for your honesty and integrity last night. That's when it clicked. The man from last night? The one who lost his wallet? Thomas nodded. He was very impressed with how you handled the situation. He said you could have stayed quiet and let suspicion fall on you, but instead you demanded the truth. He finds that quality rare and valuable. Lisa looked around at the growing crowd. People were taking pictures with their phones, and she could see neighbors coming out of shops to see what was happening. This was becoming the biggest news their street had seen in years. I can't accept this, Lisa said, even though her heart was racing with excitement. It's too much. I was just doing what any one honest person would do. Actually, Thomas said, opening his briefcase, that's exactly why my client wants you to have it. He said honest people are hard to find, and when you find them, you should reward them. He pulled out a folder of papers. But the car is just the beginning. Lisa's knees felt weak. The beginning? Thomas handed her the folder. My client has also established an education fund for your brother David. $200,000, enough to cover his engineering degree and graduate school if he chooses. Lisa had to sit down on the curb. $200,000. That was more money than her family had ever dreamed of having. David could finish his degree without working 3 part-time jobs. He could focus on his studies and actually become the engineer he'd always wanted to be. There's more, Thomas continued. Your mother's medical expenses have been taken care of, all of them. Past bills, current treatments, and future care. She'll never have to worry about choosing between medicine and groceries again. Tears started flowing down Lisa's face. She'd carried the weight of her family's financial problems for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely. Her mother could get the surgery her doctor had recommended. David could stay in school. They could actually have a future instead of just surviving day to day. Why? Lisa whispered. Why would he do all this? Thomas sat down on the curb next to her. He told me that in his business he's surrounded by people who lie to him every day. People who tell him what they think he wants to hear because of his money. Last night you told him to check the security cameras even though it could have proven you guilty. You chose truth over safety. He said that's worth more than money. Mr. Romano came running out of the diner having heard the commotion. When he saw Lisa crying on the curb next to the Rolls-Royce, his face went through about 6 different expressions. Lisa, what's happening? Whose car is this? Are you okay? Thomas stood up and extended his hand. You must be Mr. Romano. My client asked me to speak with you as well. Mr. Romano shook his hand suspiciously. About what? He'd like to offer Lisa a position with his company. Executive assistant, starting salary of $120,000 per year, full benefits, and opportunities for advancement. Lisa's head snapped up. $120,000? The position would involve managing his schedule, handling correspondence, and advising him on various business matters. He said he needs someone he can trust completely. And after last night, he believes you're that person. Mr. Romano looked stunned. Lisa, that's amazing. But what about the diner? You're one of our best workers. Lisa felt torn. She loved working at Romano's, and Mr. Romano had always been good to her. But this opportunity could change everything for her family. "Don't worry about the diner," Thomas said, reading her expression. "My client is also prepared to make a substantial investment in Romano's, enough to renovate, expand, and compete with those new coffee shops down the street." Mr. Romano's eyes widened. He wants to invest in the diner? He believes in supporting local businesses, especially ones run by good people. He was impressed by the loyalty your employees showed you last night. Lisa stood up slowly, still holding the car keys. The crowd had grown larger, and people were starting to figure out that something amazing was happening. She could see David, running down the street. Someone must have called him. "I don't understand," Lisa said. "People don't just give away cars and money to strangers." Thomas smiled. "My client isn't most people. He built his fortune by recognizing good character when he sees it. He said you reminded him that there are still honest people in the world, and that's worth investing in." David arrived, out of breath and confused. "Lisa, what's going on? Mrs. Chen called and said there's a fancy car here for you?" Lisa turned to her brother with tears of joy streaming down her face. "David, we're going to be okay. Better than okay. You're going to finish college, Mom's going to get her surgery, and everything's going to be different." 6 months later, Lisa sat in her new office on the 40th floor of a downtown skyscraper, looking out at the city below. She'd kept the Rolls-Royce but still took the bus sometimes, just to remember where she came from. David was thriving in his engineering program, and their